So this is what we are going to cover today, that is UI record API. So in the previous video, we talked about what is Lightning Data Service, where we have seen three different components. We have seen the use cases. We have seen the different tags. We have seen how you can override the actions, the standard actions that Salesforce does provide. But that was more like, I'll say either less or more, it was more standard functionality, where you just pass on the information and everything, the UI we are getting created for you. Now there could be a requirement, there could not be like, there would always be a requirement where you need to develop a Lightning web component. You need to create certain records and then maybe show the success message or navigate to the created record. That kind of things could be there where your requirement is really not fit for the standard components that we have seen. Like, let's say you wanted to create a component where you wanted to insert account, opportunity contact, and opportunity contact role from the same component. So your standard component cannot work. Okay. So in that case, we have got another record API module, that is UI record API. So if you remember in the previous video, we talked about there is something called UI asterisk API. So this is UI record API. It actually gives us the ability to create a record, fetch the information about a record based on a record ID, update a record as well as delete a record without writing a single line of code for Apex class. So if we talk about the introduction part, this is a module which comes within Lightning /UI record API that gives us multiple wire adapters as well as JavaScript APIs method to create or update or delete or get the record information. Okay. So basically it provides both kind of methods, the wire adapters as well as the JavaScript APIs. And when we say JavaScript APIs, you really don't need to worry about, because this is not something integration. These are the methods that we get within the UI record API, and we can utilize to get the information. The reason we are saying record JavaScript API is because it is behind the scene going to use a UI record API that we talked about yesterday as well, where Lightning Data Service is going to interact with Lightning UI record API, and this UI record API is going to interact with the Salesforce database, with Salesforce server, and get the information for you. Okay, so that's what we have. Now these are some of the methods which are really important for us. We will start from creating a record that accepts a record input. The format of a record input is a completely very easy, basically I would say, to prepare a object record format, which is really easy. Then there is a method called delete record, which is really easy for deleting a record. Just takes a parameter called record ID. Get record is used for fetching the information about a record based on the record ID. So basically it takes the record ID and it takes the fields that you wanted to query. Maybe, for example, you wanted to query the account fields, then it will take account ID and then the fields like name, rating, industry, and the format is same that we talked about yesterday. Okay. Then there is a method called get field value, and this is going to be used in conjunction with get record. So if you are using if you really are using get record to fetch the information about any account, object, contract, opportunity, or any custom object, you can use this method, get record method, to get the information, and any field value that you wanted to get, that you can use with the help of get field value, that takes the record information as a first parameter and the fields that you wanted to fetch from the particular record that you have fetched. And then there is, at the end, we have got update record. It again takes the two parameters. We can ignore the second one because we rarely use this parameter. But the first one is record input, which really takes the record ID and the fields which you really wanted to update. So these are the 5 methods that we are going to take a look into the coming 30 or 40 minutes. So as we talked about that, our UI record API actually gives us the wire adapters, we are going to have a very basic overview about the wire adopters. We are having a dedicated session on wire adopter. So if you don't get much detail, or if you don't get into the detailing part of these methods, you really don't need to worry about, because we really have a dedicated session for this. But at a high level, wire adopters are basically the adopters that gives you the ability to call the Apex class, gives you the ability to use any wire adopter provided by the multiple modules like UI record API, object info API, I think related list API is there. So there are multiple wire adopters that Lightning Web Component or Salesforce does provide by default, and we can easily use with the help of @wire decorator and get the information. It could be calling the Apex class and getting the information. It could be maybe sorry. It could be using the any of the methods that we just talked about here, like create record, delete record, not create record, get delete record. These all are the APIs. Get record is the wire method. Out of these 5 methods, get record is a wire adopter. All 4 are the APIs. Okay. Yeah. So one important thing that you need to keep in your mind is whenever you are using wire adopter to fetch the data, either using any Lightning modules or using the or you are using would say yes, or you are using this wire adopters any API calls, the data is going to be read only, so you cannot modify it. This is immutable data. You cannot modify it. If you really wanted to modify it, you need to take a silo copy. You need to make the silo copy either using spread operator, the 3 dots that we talk about, or using the object.assign. And if it is an array, you can utilize json.parse, json.stringify in the parse. We will see all 3 methods today itself. Okay. This is a very basic structure that you could see. We need to use import. And as these are going to be adopter the methods, so we are going to have curly braces opening and closing. Within this curly braces, we are going to have our methods that we wanted to call. Okay. And then from the adopter module, whatever the module we wanted to, it could be Salesforce Apex, it could be the Lightning UI record API, Lightning object info API, whatever the module that we are trying to get or fetch the information. Now this is the very simple syntax @wire. This is going to be your adopter ID. This is nothing. This is your method name that you have to put. And the configuration, maybe there are properties which are basically not properties. There are methods that really requires or accepting some of the parameters from your from by default. Like let's say if we talk about this method, right? Get record method we talk about. So this get record takes record ID and that takes fields, right? So you really have to provide those configuration over here as a part of adopter configuration. Now, as this is going to call a method, it really returns either a property or a function. Okay. And every wire method is going to return either error or data. How we are going to see it. Again, this is the same code that we have given here. Now we say here like the objects applied to this this is going to have 2 type of shape. We talk about, right? The return type of our wire method is going to be either error or data. So this is our data. It could be of any type like string, integer, array, objects, array of objects, complex class structures. It could be anything. And then there is an attribute called error. That is going to be the error object. It has multiple values like status code. It has, I think, message, and then it has maybe there are 3 or 4 properties for the error object. We would see what are all those properties. So let's talk about the syntax of our create record. First thing, let's talk about a use case. Let's say that you wanted to have a component here in your Salesforce homepage. You wanted to, like, you have your component has 2 parts. The first part of your component is to accept the name of your account and Second part of your component is going to accept the first name, last name, and email of your contact. And once you click on a button, that button is actually going to call a method. That method is going to create account first and then contact. And then both the accounts and contacts are going to be related based on the relationship. Okay, that's the use case we have. Now, create record we talked about, right? This is going to take the record input as a parameter. And this is basically the format of your record input. You really have to create an object called field. It could be fields or it could be anything. It could be fields, more fields, my fields, or account fields, contacts fields. This is just a name. You can have anything, but it has to be curly braces. Okay. And then within this fields, you have to provide the field API name and then the value. It's very simple. I'm going to compare based on the Salesforce object and then this create record, and you would be easily able to understand it. Okay. And then this is main part, create record, which takes two things, the API name of your object and the fields that you wanted to create. So let's quickly go to our VS Code and then start working on this. Before we start, any questions so far we talked about? Okay, if no questions, let's repeat the slides. Which one? This one?
Previous, this, sir. Yes.
Okay, this one, right? The create record.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So as we talked about, right, Lightning UI record API actually gives us the multiple methods, and one method is create record. And this create record, we really wanted to create a record. So if we wanted to create a record, we need to know which record we wanted to create, which object it is, what are its fields, what is the value that we need to provide at the time of creation of the record. So that is what it has. Now, what is the syntax? What the syntax means, what is we are going to write into our JavaScript. So the very first thing is that we have to import the create record method from Lightning UI record API, because this create record comes from the UI record API module. Now, this is the syntax of your create record method, which really takes a record input and then it returns the promise. When we talk about promise, there are three methods. Out of three methods, it is really recommended that we implement at least two methods. One is then and one is finally. Not finally. One is then and one is catch. And then you can also, as a best practice, you can also implement finally method. We will talk about what each and every method is. Then this is how you are going to prepare the record input, as this create record is taking the input, right? The record input, which record I need to create. So when we create, think of like this: when you create a object record using Apex, what you really do is you create the object of your you create the instance of your object, which is, it could be account, contact, invoice, payment, or any other custom object. And then you, with the help of dot notation or maybe within the constructor, you provide the field API name and their value. So that's what we did here. We said, okay, we have created a object. We have created object like fields, where we said it could be fields or it could be anything. But as a best practice, we can always use fields. Then by default, initialize it with the help of our curly braces so that it will denote that it is a JavaScript object. Then within this object, we need to really define the values of our fields, field API name. So this is, again, I've given as name field dot field API name, but you could really use the way you can say here, you can provide the name API name of your field. It could be name, it could be active _ C, industry, or annual revenue, rating, type, phone. It could be anything, and the value that you wanted to assign to that variable. And then finally prepare this record input, because so far we have only prepared the fields right? We have not prepared anything else. We just prepared the fields. So here we are preparing the record input where we are telling the API name. We are saying that we wanted to create account object. Okay. So the account object, again, here we are providing the API name. So you can provide it statically, you can provide it dynamically. We will see both way. And then the fields that we wanted to create for the account object. That's all. That is all about the create record syntax. Is it clear now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
So,
good.
like here, like since we are providing under field object, right? So it can be done the other way, like we saw yesterday, right? That we imported like some name field, like import name from Salesforce. So then as it is, that can be used, right? Instead of writing name underscore field dot field API name.
Yeah, that is what we have done here. We imported.
Okay.
So basically this syntax, that is right. The syntax I haven't written here. So basically this
Oh,
name
okay,
field,
okay, okay.
name field is nothing. It is the import statement.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we will see both ways. You'll get more clear picture if there is any doubt.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, any other questions? Any doubt? Okay. So yeah, if no questions, let's talk about the very first thing. As we talked about, we are going to create the record, right? So now if you wanted to create a record, we have to import. So what we will do is we will write an import statement. And what we really wanted to do is we have to use curly braces opening and closing because we wanted to import some methods from the library. Okay. We will say create record. If you type create, or you see there is a IntelliSense, which is really good nowadays, coming up very easily. So you have to select create record and you select create record. It's going to do the rest for you. It's imported. You can also maybe try to do like something create record, or maybe let's say delete record. And if you select this, it's going to really import that. So it's really is easy these days to import the methods that we really wanted to have. Okay. So the very first step is done. Now let's talk about, we said that we wanted to create account object, we wanted to create contact object. So let's import the account object first. Okay. How last time in yesterday's session, we have seen how we can import the fields. Now let's talk about how we can import the account of any object. So we have to say import, just put the any name, let's say account object from. Now put the single quotes where you wanted to go. You wanted to go to Salesforce. Then where you wanted to, within Salesforce, what you wanted to do, either you wanted to call the Apex or you wanted to read the schema. So say schema. Now what schema you wanted to read is, you really wanted to read the account object. That's it. Then under the account, we wanted to have one field called name. So we will say import and we will say name field from, again, Salesforce. Let's do the copy paste for this. And here after the account, in the second line for our name field import, put dot and say name. We've just got for account object. Similarly, we are going to do for the contact object. Now there were three fields in our scenario, like email, first name and last name. So the very basic thing we will do, the first thing we will do is we will import contact object. Please interrupt me in between if you feel like I'm going very fast, or maybe you're not able to understand the things. So we imported contact. Now we need to import first name and last name. Okay. So if you see for the first name field in the call in the line number 10, we need to say contact dot first name and contact dot last name. Then there is one more field that we talked about is email. So let's import that as well. Everyone is clear up to here? Any questions, any confusion, anything? Okay. So Mayank, you are talking about, right? We can import the field. So basically here is how we import it. Okay. Now let's create like have something in our HTML where we are going to have a lightning card. And then here I'm going to title, I will say LDS create. The icon could be anything. And as usual, we will change paragraph to division. If you really want to have that, you can have, but if you will have paragraph and then within paragraph, you will try to utilize paragraph or division, you will get the error. So that's why as a best practice, I always utilize division at the top. Now here we are really going to have the form. Okay. So let's say account form. Sorry, form. And then we are going to have contact form. For account, we're really going to have only one field. So let's quickly create a field that is LWC input. Type is going to be text. Variant, let's keep it as a standard. For the name, let's quickly say name. And for label, we will say account name. Okay. And let's make sure it is required. And similarly, for our contact, we need three fields like first name, last name, email. So let's do copy paste 3 times. And for the top two, the data type is going to be text. We really need to change the name, which is going to be first name and last name. And the third one is data type is going to be email. And then just say email here. And then at the end, we really need a button here. So that button I really need to have. So I just created a division tag, applied a class called SLDS padding around large, so that it is going to give me the large padding. And let's apply the same class to the other division as well. Now let's quickly create the button here. Variant I'm going to say as brand, so that it will take the branding of my Salesforce org. And label, let's say as create records. Title same as create records, and then this is a button our handle click. And let's define this method. Any questions, confusion so far? Anyone? If not, I have a question for you. Why I have given the name as first name like this? I could have given like this. What is the reason? Can anyone tell me? Except Rohit.
It's API name and you can
API name.
It's the API name for what?
Oh, sorry. So here you can reference that, right? Using event object, like you can identify like which input data you are taking.
Okay, good. So this API name is for which object?
No, it look like that is a contact object field API name, but here we are basically here we can give any name, but just to identify like, okay, like if somebody is entering in the second text box, you will be treated as a first name.
Okay, yeah, true. So
When-
basically, yeah. These are the API name of our contact object, because this is basically nothing. It's a contact form. And on the top, this is the API name of our account object. Okay, that's what we had. Good. And then we define this handle click, where we say that event, and maybe, yeah, let's deploy this. Before we deploy it, let's go to XML file and let's expose it. I'm going to have a master label, and where I'll say LDS create record. And the expose, the targets that we are going to use it is going to be home page only. I really don't want it to have any other place. Now let's deploy this. In the meantime, our file is getting deployed. Let's have the input event handler So we are going to say on change. Okay. And this time we are going to say handle account input change. I'm going to have two different methods. The reason two different methods, because in future there could be a requirement that I really wanted to add more fields for account. Okay. So that's why there is a separate handler for handle account input change, and then separate handler for that is going to be on change handle contact input change. When you are taking the input for two different objects in the same LWC form, it's better to have the different handlers for different objects. If there are three objects, have the three different handlers. Okay. So we have got two different input handlers here. Let's define those input handlers. And as we really need the value, so we will say event, that's the mandatory parameters in case we wanted to read the input values. So we have got these two methods, right? Let's use the prevent default for both the methods we have got. Okay, let's deploy this. So for what we did is, it's really simple, and you already know how to do most of the things instead of the UI record API import part, right? Let's go ahead into our Salesforce org, add our component, and that is LDS create record. And I'm going to put it here, and I'll get rid of the other one that I have. Okay, let's save this. So if you notice that, maybe let's this come. If you notice that, right, because of our padding, we are really seeing the huge spacing all around, and you can see there is a big difference. Okay. If you click on a create record, this input, which is saying that this is really not saying that these are the required inputs. Maybe we can add the validation later on. But when I say anything, maybe here, if I say salesforce.com and then provide some name, okay. So it could be any name, and if I provide the detail, it should basically, if you click on create record, it should create the account record and contact record as well. So how you are going to do is, now you know that this is your account record, this is your contact record. So let's first talk about when you create the record in your Salesforce Apex, how you do it. Let's say you wanted to create the record for your account. So you will say account ACC record. The variable name could be anything based on your need. And there are two ways for this. Either you say ACC record dot name equal to whatever the name you want to give for account. This is your API name, the API name of your field. Or what you do is you say name equal to the name of your account. These are the two different ways. Like you could have multiple fields here, maybe like phone. So this is how you do, and then you utilize an insert statement and you say ACC record. It's done. And if you wanted to create the contact record under the same account record, you create another variable and you say contact record. And you do the same way. And here you can say account ID, because this is the field that relates contact with account. And you can say ACC record.id. And furthermore, you can add the field API names here. That's how you do, right? And I hope you all are aware about this. And then you just say insert contact record. Anyways, this code is not going to work because last name field is not provided the value for last name. Similarly, if you notice, if you recall our scenario that we have, we are trying to create the account record, then we are trying to create the contact record. So we really need to create two records here. Maybe you can say account record fields, okay, and then you can say contact record fields. This is really, you can have this, okay. And then once you are making the change in your account input, you really need to have say let name equal to event dot, or what I will do is I'll say let name and value equal to event dot target using object destruction. And these are the objects we are going to define like object here. And then for the account fields, you can say this dot account record fields in the name. You already know why we are doing this, and value. Similarly do for contact records, right? This is up to here. Everyone is okay? Okay, why are the import statement blur in the JS file and also not giving semicolon in the contract import statement box? Okay, good question. I was expecting someone to ask this question. So first of all, why these are maybe blur or these are grayed out, right? So if you don't use, you just declare something, you will see the import statement like this. This might be because of some VS Code extension that I might have installed, but this is basically the, I would say, internal feature of any JavaScript library. It could be JavaScript, Node.js, or any other library. Okay. It says that it is saying that you have declared these variables, but you have not used anywhere. That's why these are grayed out. The answer to your second question, in JavaScript, either you wanted to, if you wanted to provide semicolon, that's well and good. If you don't want to provide semicolon, JavaScript is smart enough to understand that from this point of time, I need to terminate the line, and then later on, I need to perform some other some other logic. So this is something which is JavaScript things. So if you want, you can provide the semicolon. If you want, maybe if you forget providing the semicolon, it's not like Apex, which will say that you forget to provide the semicolon, expecting semicolon, there is a curly braces or parenthesis. So that's the JavaScript thing. I hope it's clear. Okay. Next thing, yeah, let's talk about, now you're clicking on this, right? There is a method called handle click that is going to create the record. So first thing, what it is going to do is it is going to create the account record. And we already have a method called createRecord. Now we will use createRecord. Use opening and closing parenthesis. Okay. As we said that this createRecord, basically what it does return is it returns the promise. Okay. So every promise in JavaScript has like 3 methods, but you at least have to implement one method. As a recommendation, as a best practice, you should always implement all 3 methods. What are those methods? Then, catch, and finally. Okay. So let's implement. How you're going to implement is, it is very easy. Use the method name and then say dot, use then, opening and closing parenthesis. And this then is going to be executed when your API call, your method call was success, and it is going to give you the result. And in the form of a function, in the form of a callback function. Okay. So what you can do is you can utilize again opening and curly brace, opening and closing parenthesis, and use the arrow function, and your then method is implemented. Here you could say a response, you could say result. So whatever the result you would get after the successful method call or API call, you'll get it here, and you can do the console.log, and you can say json.stringify and just put it result. It could be of any time, any type. It could be simple as it is like a string integer, or it could be complex like arrays or array of records. Then you could have dot catch, and then catch is basically going to execute when there is any error, and it gives you the information about an error within the callback function. So you have to use the same way like we did in our then, and then we just have to do the console.error, and you can put the stringify, because error is always going to be the object. So you can put the json.stringify to print it in the form of a string, for the better readability. And in the last, you could have finally, and that really does accept the callback function, but it really doesn't give you anything. Okay. Now, what is the use of this finally method? Because we talked about then method is going to be giving you the positive result, the result of your outcome, the outcome basically. The catch is going to give you the error if there is any error. What is finally? So this finally is going to execute always. Okay. So it's going to execute always, either success or error. Now, what kind of logic we can put here is we can put the cleanup logic. Okay. Cleanup logic like turning the spinner off, or maybe cleaning the variables if the variables are not utilized. That kind of things we can put into our finally method. Then and catch both return object. There is a question from Mayank. No, Mayank, the catch always return an object, but then is not going to return an object. It is going to, the data type of your result is going to completely depend on the method that you are going to have. Maybe this method, this createRecord method actually returns the object which has been created. That's why I have used json.stringify. But suppose that there is a method called delete record itself, right? The delete record does not return the object. So you really don't need to stringify it because it really doesn't return the object. Maybe you are calling an Apex class. Your Apex class is returning the string or list of object, or maybe a simple decimal value. Then your result is going to be a type of decimal. So the data type of your then method, or I would say the return type of your then method is any. It could be type of any. As it is a JavaScript, it is very easy for us to utilize the variable, and then based on whatever it is, we could maybe work on the processing. So is it clear, Mayank? Okay. But if you see here, right, it really takes the record input, but we have not provided any record input, right? If you hover over this method, you will see the parameters. It takes the record input. It gives you the link that you can click on and go to the Lightning component library. Okay. So as we talked about, we are going to prepare the input, record input. So first thing that we have to do is we have to say constant. But if you say, right, if you see, I really did intentionally created these two variables because these two variables are going to hold the API name and their value as a key and value pair, right? If you come back to, you can see here, this is the API name of our field and this is the value, and these variables are going to hold that. So we really need to create constant variable. It could be constant or let. I can say record input. Okay. Now this is also an object. It takes two things. One is API name, which object I wanted to create. So I already have this account object, right? So I can say, there are two ways I can say. If I have imported the object, I can say account object dot object API name. That is basically going to give me basically nothing, account. You can also put a console.log here. Maybe I'll say json.stringify, and I'm going to use account object. So you will see what exactly this is going to return. So the dot object API name is going to return the API name of my object. Okay. And then it really takes the fields. So you really have to, let's say, account record fields. Now your record input is prepared, and this is grayed out because we're not using anywhere. And if you hover over to the variable, you will say that this record input is declared, but its value is never read. Read means we have never used. So let's provide it. And now you can see everything is working fine. Okay. We are not going to implement it for contact for now. Let's deploy this and see if this really works or not. I doubt it is going to work, because yeah, if it is not going to work, I will let you know why it's not working. If it is going to work, I will leave it as it is. Okay. So I've already opened the console in order to see if there are any error. And I'm going to provide the account name. This could be salesforce.com. Okay, I already have that input handler behind the scene, which takes the input, put it into the variable. Yeah, Mayank, we are going to come into that part. Okay. And then, yeah, let's click on create record. So you can see object API name is being printed as account and we are getting the error. Nothing happening. And this is because we have to use this dot account record fields. Okay, it says, yeah, I think we cannot use here. So maybe you have to say, let's create a variable called let fields. We are going to say this dot account record fields and put it here. Okay. So we have just created a variable which says fields. I'm going to change it to something else. The reason I wanted to showcase something. Okay. Instead of fields, I said ACC fields. Let's see what happens. Okay, so let's refresh this page. So I've got salesforce.com. If I click on create record, I got the error. It says that, you see what it says, that record field missing, field is name. It says that name field is missing. Okay. And that is what I was saying. I doubt it is going to work. Now let's try to debug it. How you are going to debug? First thing we are going to do is we are going to print this like whatever the fields we have. So we will say console.log json.stringify and put our fields here. Okay. That's the very first step that we have. We've got on change. Maybe in on change, we can have the console.log value. Okay. Now let's deploy this. I know what's the error, but I still wanted to showcase you that there is a value coming in this variable. Let's again do the refresh. Okay, and we will say salesforce.com. You could see here the value is getting printed like a pyramid. Click on create record. You could see that the name is having the field of, like, the name is having the value, but it is still saying that required field missing name. Now the reason it is because the variable name should be as it is, like fields, like this. It should be as it is. And once you provide the value like this, fields, you say fields here, then the UI record API is going to identify that, okay, you are setting the fields. Okay. So let's refresh this page now. I'm going to provide some random value. The reason, because I already have an account with the same name and there is a trigger running, it's going to prevent the duplicate creation. Click on create record and you can see the record has been created. Okay, this is the outcome. Maybe I can go ahead and copy it and open a site called code beautify JSON viewer. And you could see here, I've got fields. Under fields, you will see there would be a field which will actually give you the record ID, that is ID. Sorry, not this one. There is a field called ID. This one, you see, it is going to give you the ID of the recently created record. Now, how you could refer here is, you could now see here, you say if result, you could say let account ID equal to result.fields.id, because fields is the object that contains all the fields. So you would have fields.id and you would easily get the account ID. Now there is again a requirement for creating the contact record. Okay. So we could again use the create record method here, prepare the information about the contact record and do the processing. But instead of putting it here, we would have a new method. We will say handle contact create. It's going to take account ID because we wanted to create the contact under the account ID, under that account. And once the record is successfully saved, we would say, now to call this method, how you will call this method? You would say this dot the method name, and it is accepting a parameter. You can say this is the value that I'm going to pass it to this method. And here in this method, we could, I'm just doing a copy paste, and instead of account ID, I will say contact ID, and we can do a console.log. Okay. But we have to prepare the fields. We have to prepare record input, and we have to utilize this account ID as well. So let's prepare constant record input. It's going to take two things. What is the one? First one is contact object dot object API name. Oh, sorry, it's going to take API name like this. The second one is fields, right? So we really need to have the fields here. So we'll say let fields equal to this dot contact record fields, and then provide the fields here. Now, our code is really going to work, but as we are not associating the contact record, because this account IDs, we have never we have not basically provided a code to create a contact record under the account. We have not associated the contact with account. So how we will associate? So if you see, right, if you come back to a presentation, if you see, this is how we are providing we are assigning the value. We say fields, the field API name, and what value we want to have. Now let's come back here, import one more field, that is going to be account ID field. And coming back to your question, Mayank. So import account ID and say account ID. Okay. And this time I'm going to use, before I prepare a record input, you'll say fields within the brackets. If you remember, we have seen how dynamically, how to assign the value dynamically to an object using this bracket, square brackets, right? That's what we did in our change methods within the square brackets. That's what we are saying. We say fields. Now what field we wanted to assign is account ID field dot field API name. And what value we wanted to assign, that is account ID. Okay. Now you had a question, Mayank, that where are we using the imported fields? So if you really wanted to use these imported fields, you could utilize while you are preparing the field record. Okay. You are preparing the fields. But the reason we have not used name or first name or last name or email, because we already have the API names as part of our name attribute. So we really don't need to utilize this because we already have that field object with the as it is API name with us. And we really don't need the unnecessary imports that are going to impact the performance. But let's say there is a field like account ID that we wanted to assign behind the scene. We imported the field. Now this field is going to give you an object, and what it is going to give you is, let me do the console.log and say json.stringify, and we will see what exactly the value you are getting. And we already had this console, so I can show you into the JavaScript. So you can see here, this is the first console which says that, which is basically we printed account object that is having nothing. It is having attribute called object API name, and that is having the value of account. And similarly, once you will put your you debug your fields, it will have two attributes. One is object API name, and one is going to be the field API name. What really we need here is we really need the field API name. Where is that? Yeah, this one. We really need the field API name. This could also be done in a different way. That is this fields dot, you could say account ID, because this is the field API name. So you could do this way as well. You could also provide the other fields like maybe phone. Okay. You could say fax. So whatever the value that you wanted to set, you can set it from the backend with the help of this concept. So basically what we did is this is the dynamic way, and we really have to know that which field it is. We really have to import the field. But if you really wanted to make the input form as dynamic for any object, for any field, you just take the input from the user, which object it is, what are the fields. You render the form and you utilize this way because you already have the API name and create the record dynamically. So that's how you basically do. I've showcased you both way, like the dynamic and the, I'll say dynamic and static way. Now you will see if you go to the component library, right? How about, okay, I'll navigate to this component library and showcase you. You would see the you would see the other way, the importing way. So you can see here it is going to import maybe if you come back to the examples to your lightning library, you would see the way that they have imported everything and then they just displayed the information based on the imported fields. But if you really wanted to make it dynamic, make it reusable, this is the best way to do it. I prefer to use this way instead of going ahead and performing the unnecessary imports. Clear, everyone? Okay, so now we have just deployed the latest code. Let me put something else into the account, and maybe name, contact name, I'm going to say Jason Frank. Just the dummy data I'm trying to put it over here. Let's clear the console and click on create record. So we got some error. Sorry, we got undefined. We really didn't saw anything in the input, but the rest of information is kind of debugging, which says the object, sorry, the field. This is the field information, which says that field API name, object API name, right? Let's see, go to the contact. Maybe if the contact has been created with the name Jason Frank, you could see this has been created, but it's really not associated with the account, but the information is really getting created here. You could see, right? Jason Frank is there, the email, the phone that we provided behind the scene, every single thing is coming up here, not associated with the account. That could be a reason. Okay, so we've got this account ID. Maybe let's say we're going to do the console.log on the account ID to make sure that the ID is getting generated and we are really reading the correct ID, correct field. And we have done this value twice. So maybe I'll get rid of this. I really don't need. And it really didn't says, okay, let's see if this is the correct attribute. Okay, fields. I really do the typo a lot, so I really don't want it to. Okay, I think typo is correct. Oh, if you see what's the issue? Can anyone tell me what was the issue? No, Mank, it will always be on a small ID. Yes, that is not field array. It is not field objects. It should be result.id. Correct. So it should be result.id, the contact ID as well as the account ID. Sorry, yeah, both. Result.id. So basically the ID field that is not there within the fields object. It is outside of that field object. Okay, so now we are here. Let's refresh this. This time we should be able to see the account ID. We should be able to see the contact ID as well. Okay, so you see here, we've got account, we've got contact, and if you open this contact, and you could see now this is related to the account as well. And one thing that we have is we really don't have any validation here, right? Because we have not provided the validation. Even if I don't provide a value, okay, and try to click on create record, it will give us the error that record fields are missing, right? We could clearly see that. And if you maybe, this is basically nothing, this is the error object. So if you really wanted to read the error, okay, there is something wrong. I did not copy it correctly, maybe. Okay, this is, so basically this is not taking the proper CS. Okay, now it's coming. Yeah. So this is your error object, which you really can see there is a status, there is a status text, then there is a error type. OK is always going to be false. There could be headers, and then there will always be a body for your error. Okay. Now within the error, there could be multiple parameters like message, what's the status code, was the enhanced error type, and then you could have output, and within output you could have errors, field errors, duplicate messages. So there are so many things that you could have, and then you could utilize this JSON file to parse the information and get the records. Okay, that is one thing. I will showcase you how you could parse this. You really don't need to worry about that. Next thing is that we talked about the input validation, so we could quickly go to the Lightning component library, search for input, go to the documentation tab and search for the method called report validity and copy this. We all know, right? And then maybe create a method called handle validate. It's not going to take anything, and then return all valid. We have already talked about what this does. Again, I'm going to explain it. So we have the input, Lightning input. We don't have any other type of input like text area, rich text, address, or first name or last name. So what this is basically doing is it is using the template.query selector all and fetching this Lightning input. Okay, maybe if you have some other input variables like Lightning combo box. Okay, combo box is nothing, it's a pick list. Okay, you have text area. Maybe you have Lightning. I think there is something called input name. I believe that's something there. So you could just put the comma separated Lightning input elements. It's going to take all the elements and return you the array based on this. And then we are just trying to do the 3 dots. The reason we are saying 3 dots so that it can create the shallow copy for us and we can perform the operation, the manipulation or logic that we want. Then this is basically using the reduce method. Array reduce method basically is going to return you one single result. Okay, based on whatever the logic you have provided here. So basically that is if you talk about array reduce, the syntax of your reduce method is like it's going to take like this. The first parameter is going to be accumulator, second is going to be item, okay, Third is going to be the, okay, it's going to be previous. This is accumulator, then it's going to be item, then it's going to be index, third parameter, and fourth parameter is going to be array. And this array is always going to be read only. Okay. Now, if you see, this accumulator is always going to take the latest value from this condition. And you can also define a default value to the accumulator by providing the comma before you close the parenthesis, and you provide the value like the true, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, could be anything. Okay. That's basically the syntax of your accumulator, your reduce method. So that's what we did use here. We used the reduce method, and we are just taking two parameters. One is accumulator and one is the current item, which is item, this one. Okay. The rest two we are ignoring. Then by default, we are saying that our component, our user is providing the perfect value for each and every input fields. And we are saying that the valid is true. Like that means the form is really valid. We really don't need to worry about it. Okay. Then later on, what we are saying is we are using this current item, which is going to be nothing, which is going to be the input, lightning input field one by one. And if there are anything else like lightning text area, maybe I can have that as well. Like text area name could be anything. We really don't. Let's say description. This is the description. I will use the account because there is a field called description on the account, and that is type of text area. Okay, so we have this text area. Maybe label could be description and it could be required. Okay, so we have got this description, right? So what will happen is it is going to take input one by one. So if you see, this is the text area. This time we have taken it. Make sure the typo is correct. So it's going to take one by one input here, and it is going to report the validity. So what this report validity method will does is it is going to check if the variable is, basically it is going to report the error if there is any error. Maybe complete this field, or you need to fill this field, provide a valid email, or provide a valid phone number. And then we are using a return statement, which is always going to be either a true, false, or it could be a number, it could be decimal, it could be anything. Where we are saying that whatever the valid so far is there, and input component dot check validity. This is going to check the validity of your input, either it is a valid or not. And whatever the result of this particular condition is again going to be stored in your accumulator. And then if the result of your input is false, it is going to return false from this method. Okay, that's what we did at a high level. Now we could use this handle validate in our main method, that is handle click. And we can say let all valid equal to this dot handle validate. And we will say if not all valid, that means the value of this all valid is false, return the code from here and don't execute any single line. So if there are invalid inputs, the code is going to be returned from here and the rest of lines are not going to be executed. All clear? Any questions so far? Okay, so let's do the final testing now. If you click on create records now, you will see you're getting the error here. Description field, we are not really getting the error. Maybe there is a typo or could be something else, but we see the error here for all the 4 fields that we have. You cannot create the record, right? You keep hitting, it is going to keep showcasing the error. So that's how you provide the validation. And we really are not able to cover the rest of all 4 methods that we are going to cover in, I think, Monday. But any questions so far on this? I really wanted to take the things into the deep dive so that you can understand everything.
Yeah, I mean, just validity thing, right? So that like here basically we in that method we can't do any customization. Just like if all the inputs are required, then just place it, and then we just bother about the returns, right? Whatever it's returning, either true or false. That's it, right?
Yeah, when you say customize, what you really wanted to customize?
Customization, like sometimes we pass input, like suppose here if we are create record, right, then we pass the input, right, like whether it's account object or something like that, right? So it's like simply like a standard method we should use just to check whether all the required fields are there or not. That's it.
Yeah,
Right?
that is basically the input component validation. But if you
Uh,
wanted to, the other part of validation is already being taken care by Salesforce, right? You really don't need to worry about like, let's say if the account object is not correct, the fields are not correct, your Salesforce is going to report it back to you in the form of error, because you cannot really add a validation for that. You really don't know what's the scheme of your Salesforce org is. But yeah, on top of this, if you really wanted to have some other validation, you could have, after the input validity is done, you could have another validation there. Maybe you wanted to see if the account type is not customer, you might wanted to throw case another error. That is, you can definitely customize on top of that.
one more question. Can you go to your code once, JavaScript side?
Yeah,
Yes, so at top.
this one, right?
No, top, at the top.
Okay.
So here, like you written right at line number 17 and 18, like account record fields and contact record fields, a blank object, right? Basically. So like here, these variables can be any, right? So I'm not getting like how come we so sure that once we write account record fields, it will have all the account record fields inside this object. I mean to
It,
say like so.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean to say like suppose for example, like we return right import account ID field, right, at line number 30. So that time we mention like fields in the bracket account ID or like this field. So that time we know, okay, that this is one of the field. But here just with blank object, how we know like that field all fields are there?
Yeah,
Because
it
this
will,
variable can be anything, right? Any
the,
object we can create right as a blank.
there you will never be sure, and you cannot say that there are going to be all fields. As a developer, see, this is nothing. As a developer, you are developing it, right? You are declaring this variable based on your need. You're saying I'm going to utilize this variable for storing the input variable from the user that are going to be provided by my form which I have designed. Okay. So once you have designed, you as a developer are going to say that in this variable, what all fields I wanted to provide. And you are going to provide that the way we have provided here with the help of our input change events. Okay. Then there could be a possibility that you could provide anything else. There could be, you might say another object here, right? You might say an array here. Maybe you could say ABC and then some object here. That could be, definitely that could be there. But in that case, this is something that Salesforce does it for you. When you send the information to Salesforce, Salesforce will say that this is not a valid structure that I accept. So please rectify the error, send me the valid structure, and then only I would be able to give you the correct response. So if at some time you are sending some bad data, that is done by Salesforce. But definitely, if you know that, if you you might wanted to check if there is something wrong or not, maybe you have some criteria, those criteria you can apply. But this is something going to be the business specific, or maybe you are developing, so it is going to be specific to you, because this is not something which is in generic.
Yeah, actually I missed one. I got it now.
Yeah. Yep. So Nikhil, isn't we check the validity first and then report? I really doubt it is going to work, but we can definitely give it a try. Like we can just swap the method here. It's going to be it is going to be report validity and check validity. Okay. Because this is the standard code which I've been keep using. I've never questioned to Salesforce that why you have done this way, but you can definitely, because some things are really there with us, we can really do that. And you could see here, or maybe if you say Salesforce and if you say create records, you could see here. So basically, if you do that way, I got the answer here, like it is going to check one field at a time. It's not going to check all the fields. Now, if you do the other way, it's going to tell you all the fields. I'm going to say that, okay, now this is basically the error that you have in your fields. Go ahead and fix all the fields. Otherwise, if let's say I've got 50 fields and I have not filled the 10 fields and then I'm keep getting error one by one, I'll get frustrated because I have to click on create record or submit for the 10 times. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? Anything else? Why should we prefer to use create record from UI record API, not any Apex class to handle the DML operation? Okay, good question. So if you really need to create the record, okay, you really need to create a record in Salesforce using a UI. The first preferable way is to use LDS, either Lightning Record Form or that is the one, Lightning Record Form. Okay, that is the first preferable way. If you really can't achieve it using the preferable way, that is Lightning Record Form, then you should consider using Lightning Record UI Record API, because that's the other standard way provided by Salesforce. It's like out of box functionality. Okay. And then if you really see that you really cannot utilize record like this, that is UI record API, then you should consider using Apex. It's more like you are considering trigger on top of flow, or maybe you're considering the Apex classes or trigger on top of invocable Apex, because Salesforce already says that these are the standard out of box standard functionality that you really need to, if you want to have this kind of scenarios, just go ahead and implement using a standard way instead of writing the Apex class, because Apex class is going to have a maintainability, scalability, performance, test classes, and there are so many things. So you should always try to use LDS, then UI record API, and then custom Apex class. Now, if I has to give an example, your UI record, your standard Lightning LDS actually gives you the out of box UI that you cannot really make the changes more. You cannot really tweak the CSS. You cannot change the look and feel. Now, if you really wanted to change the theme, you wanted to change the look and feel, go with the LDS create record. That is basically UI record API, where you can have uh, you can have your own CSS. You can have the button anywhere you want. You can apply the custom CSS styling, change the look and feel. You really have the ability to do the validation, custom validation. You can set the fields behind the scene and do it. And if you say that, okay, you really wanted to call the Apex class, and based on the input that user is providing, you need to call the Apex class, then get the data from there, do some validation, and then either show error or perform the logic, then Apex class is the option. You should not always complicate the things. You should always try to utilize the out of box functionalities that are already provided there instead of going with the custom. Did that help? Okay, thank you.